Hello, Tailoring Talkers. This is a long time no see recording we're doing today. As you can see here, you've got me and Alex, Jon and Alex, despite it saying Bobby and Jon at the bottom of my screen. Alex, how are you? Long time no see, mate.
I'm okay. I'm just very busy. Work's a lot, and then everything else is a lot. But I've got a lovely puppy that keeps me in trouble. So that's been nice. But yeah,
Is he? Does the puppy you have? Does he have a cape and does he run around trashing things?
He certainly is disruptive as Krypto.
Yeah.
It certainly is. It's certainly that. But it's not a cute white sort of fluffy thing. Instead, he's a golden retriever. So close enough.
Oh, still cute. As you may have noticed from my background and from our conversation, we are here to talk about Supergirl, which came out this year, so it's quite recent to talk about. This is the second of the series of films in the James Gunn and Peter Safran DC universe. This is the film that came after Superman in 2025. This is not, as I was expecting, an origin story like the Helen Slater film, but actually it's kind of, I would say it's more of a cosmic revenge western. And we'll talk about the comic as well, Women of Tomorrow, which I have just finished reading, actually.
Nice. Oh, look at that. That's great.
This is the trade of all of them. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'll discuss later on which I enjoyed more, the film or the comic. That is a Tom King and Bilquis Evely's comic. Matthias Lopez, who I think is a letterer. Very, very good. I enjoyed the comic very much. And it was interesting reading it after seeing the film, which I think is probably the best way around to do it, actually. But yes, so the film Supergirl is directed by Craig Gillespie, who directed I, Tonya and Cruella. And he was chosen mainly because DC is someone who could... who's comfortable balancing the humour, the emotion, the action that I think you see in a lot of Gunn's films anyway, but also not trying to make another generic superhero film. I've got a whole tangent to talk about superhero films later on, Alex, as well. But I think probably when you start off by saying, if you've not yet seen the film, I would wait and listen to this or watch this after you've seen the film. We are going to talk a lot of it. It's not a first thoughts recording today. This is going to be a full spoilerific review and how we felt about it. So first impressions, so you've seen the film, Alex. What is your general feeling on the film? General vibe that you got after watching it?
I actually enjoyed it. There were bits that confused me. There are flaws to it. It's not a perfect film. But I actually enjoyed it, and I particularly enjoyed the universe and the world that they created as they went through this. So in that respect, I think it was really quite, it was quite enjoyable. It's also a little forgettable, and we might come on to that. I thought it was good. It was certainly worth my time on a sort of sweaty 40 degrees heat day when you just want to be somewhere cool. And they put this on as well. I was happy with that. It was not a bad choice.
You were very lucky because I took a photograph of it. Actually, I went into my local cinema, and on the door outside of the theatre that I went to see was the message: "Please note this screen is warmer than usual. We apologise for any inconvenience caused, Odeon." Thank you, Odeon.
No way.
Dum. So I actually felt like I was quite close to a red sun for most of the filming, for most of the film being shown here. I felt weak and pathetic and hot.
The one time you really needed it to be cool.
Yeah,
no.
So it was very warm. And there were about 3 of us in the cinema, thankfully, so it wasn't too full of people. And again, more on that concern as well. But overall, I enjoyed it. It was a good film, a good afternoon film. I would say, having just rewatched David Chris Corenswet, is that how you pronounce his name? Corenswet, the Superman film. I have rewatched that this afternoon with my son, who's never seen it before, who's now on holiday with me as well.
Lovely.
So just to get context, because he wants to see the Supergirl film as well, but he hasn't seen the first of these series. So we watched that, and I do feel like I preferred the Superman film. I felt like there was more balance of fan pleasing and new stuff, whereas this Supergirl film was
Yeah.
quite a departure from anything I've seen or read before, which is good. You know, it's good to have something different. I have my grumbles. I think there's some good, you know, the good and the bad, which we'll go into. But overall, I enjoyed it. I probably would watch it again. You know,
Yeah.
it's a film I
Yeah.
would. There are some films that I would never watch again because I just wouldn't have the patience. I was
Hmm.
quite tired when I went to see this film as well,
Mm.
and I did. And the heat in the cinema, I did doze off a couple of times, which I can put down to my age, the temperature, how tired I was, and not down to the film. Because I think if I watch it again, I'll watch it all the way through. But is that also a bad sign? I don't know. We'll discuss that later on. So.
Mm.
In terms of the inspiration for the story, as we mentioned, it's based on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, the comic.
Hmm.
I really liked the comic, and I liked the idea of the structure, and I can see why it
Right.
was chosen for this film. Actually, I can see why it's quite an original idea. Um, I think it would be very, very hard, as always, to turn that comic, you know, exactly into a film, especially based on the heavy narrative. So in the comic, Ruthye is essentially the narrative voice and does a lot of the text in that which you read as the background is Ruthye recounting her journey with Kara through the different planets in the universe after she's picked up from a planet where her father's been killed. And there's a
Mm.
few tweaks to the story that the film has, but on the whole, it keeps the basic tenet of the story from the comic, the film. The comic is very well drawn. I would say the emotion in the comic is stronger,
Mm. Yeah.
and they
Thought
make
so.
a massive change to the end of the comic compared to the film as well, like a
Hmm.
massive change,
Yeah.
which is a really interesting decision. And I wonder if it's to do with um, role models and so on for who are watching the film. It's not been a great success, has it, Alex? This film, sadly. So give me
No,
some of the figures.
I mean it really has bombed. So it's just
Yeah,
its opening weekend. Well, I say that it bombed. Okay. Its opening weekend was $63 million, which
yeah,
is really quite low for this kind of film.
yeah,
But it's actually that's not the worst bit. I think the worst bit is the second and third week showings were really, really poor. Um, and
yeah,
so it's currently at about 100 million, which is not enough to make it well, not even break even. So that's the real problem. Giving you an example, so Superman, the one last year, that made
yeah,
600 million. Now I feel like there's a couple of caveats. So firstly, it's like, Supergirl is not a lister in the list. Um,
Character-wise, you mean?
yeah, I think so. But even so, I actually feel like the way they've run this you would expect a modest performance from this, and it
Yeah,
just hasn't met anything like that. So I think that's the biggest disappointment from DC's point of view. Um, it's really hard to know why. I mean, there are the reviews, particularly the critics, were absolutely slated it. And there are reasons for that, but I just the audience itself was actually a lot more positive. So I feel like this could be a case where poor reviews and perhaps a somewhat ambivalent audience just meant it didn't work for them this time, and they just said, "Oh, I'll come back when it's a Superman one," or "I'm waiting for Spider-Man," and just they're being more selective with their choices, maybe. But I don't know. It's what do you think?
yeah. I mean, I was disappointed to see before I saw it, even before it was on general release. Certain elements of the internet were, I think, prejudging it in terms of,
Hmm.
unfortunately, there's a lot of male superhero fans out there who don't want to watch a film with a female lead still in this day and age, which is very disappointing.
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of I hate to use the phrase the anti-woke brigade
Hmm.
just put their heels in and refuse to go and see it,
Mm.
and that's a real shame because you know, for goodness sake, it's just a film, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it, isn't it? And I think a lot of it
I think that's hurt it a little bit.
yeah, a lot of the negativity could probably be just answered with like, it's just a film, guys. Just enjoy
Yeah,
it or don't. But like,
yeah,
it's really just a film. There's nothing behind it. It's just there's some gossip, in reality, it's just like it feels a bit mid. And
yeah.
that's in a way for this kind of film. That's fine. It's just a little bit disappointing for what DC needed, but it's fine.
It's a shame. I
Hmm.
think the film is fine. That's the review I give it. The film is fine. It's enjoyable. There's some good, there's some bad, and I think didn't deserve the kind of some of the rage that was out there before it even
Yeah,
started.
and there are some lots of
It's
positives that we're going to talk about, aren't we?
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah, which we should.
yeah.
So let's look at the characters. I mean, we'll start off with Milly Alcock, who plays
Hmm.
Supergirl. Um, she's sorry, my cat's whining at me. Probably wants feeding. She well, obviously is best known for House of Dragon, and she's very good in that. She was a lot younger in that. She played the
Yes,
young queen in the House of Dragon.
that's right.
And I think that's her strong portrayal
Hmm.
of the character. And I think is probably what helped her be the choice for Supergirl.
Yeah,
And I thought she was really good at the end of Superman. She comes in drunk, picking up Krypto. I think, that set a really cool precedent for film. And I really like this premise that she's on her birthday and she's going to these red planets where her powers don't
mm.
work, so she can get properly drunk because she can't when you're on a yellow planet. I think
Yeah,
Superman mentions that actually in the first film as well.
that's right.
And I like that kind of idea. And it kind of felt like a lot of movements from different types of Star Wars cantinas where she's drinking
Yes,
with different aliens or on buses with aliens,
yes,
which is great fun. And I think she was very good. I think she is definitely the standout performance in this film.
yeah,
And I really
yeah.
enjoyed her, her look. I loved the style of her with the kind of she didn't spend much of the film in the Supergirl outfit, did she? At all?
No, no, not at all. Which is good because it gave it impact. And I think
Yeah.
that's the other thing was she didn't feel overpowered as a character. So that was actually
It's
quite
it's
good.
yeah. It's always hard in a film with a superhero character like Superman or
Yeah.
Supergirl. They've got to have some sort of weakness now and then. And
Hmm.
obviously, with the Superman, it's kryptonite.
Yeah.
And I like the way that they did that with the suns as well. The different
Yeah.
coloured
Yeah.
suns
Exactly.
in the film. That's that. I found that really interesting, and it did make you
Mm,
think. Oh yeah, there's going to be some plot devices here with these different coloured suns,
that's
and
right.
she's going to have that. She's going to have that. The journey, the three
Hmm.
parts to the story journey that she has.
Mm,
But yeah, she was very good. Millie Alcock was very good. Now, I also thought Eve Ridley, who played Ruthie, was good.
yeah.
She's been in a couple of other things as well. Because I recognised her when I saw her. Um, I'm just thinking she's a young character in The Witcher, wasn't she? And she's also in Three Body
Hmm.
Problem as well.
Oh yes, yes, I remember
So
her from
she's
that. She's good.
yeah. So she's got a bit of acting background behind her already. She was
Mm,
good. I would say she's quite different to the character in the comic, and that's because the comic portrays her as much more. How do I say it? So the language that she uses in the comic, she's a very educated. Even though she's a poor farmer's girl, she has a very
yeah,
educated vernacular,
that's right.
um, whi- which is commented on quite a lot by the people she meets, but also shows that she has intelligence. And she's an intelligent girl, and I quite like the fact that you sort of spend the film deciding, is she just really really brave, or is she just really really naive? Do you see?
Yeah,
And so she
I
kind
mean
of goes on
that's
this journey in the film, doesn't she? I like that.
yeah. I think it's interesting because these are the things that kind of sometimes throw you with James Gunn's because you're
Yeah,
not really looking for a massive character progression. But I think in a way, as viewers, we go through that progression instead. So like things
yeah,
that happened like at the start, the fact that you see Supergirl, drunk, dog peeing on the stuff, and you're just like,
Yeah,
oh, this seems,
a
and
wastrel.
yeah, exactly. And initially, you're just like, well, this seems a bit off. I don't, I'm not sure about how I feel about this. Um, and then you're taken on a journey, and then by the end of it, you're rooting for them. But yeah, it's funny, and I think that's the thing. If you look at her at the start, it feels a little wooden. And then by the end of it, you've kind of completely warmed to her. I'm not necessarily sure she's changed that much as a character, though. I think it's really our picture of them that kind of has changed.
Yeah,
So,
and I
yeah, it's
think
interesting.
that's. I don't. I mean, I know we're talking about positives here,
Mm,
but I think that is the critical difference between the how it's been written for the film and
right.
how this story's been written for the comic. In the
Mm,
comic, there's a much more redemptive arc,
yes.
and I don't want to spoil it for you if you're going to read it. But the ending of the comic is completely different in terms of how Krem is dealt with, and
Right.
I think there's a really important plot point in the comic which shows that Ruthie has completely learnt and become has grown as a person. And I
Hmm.
think obviously in the comic there's eight episodes. I've read the trade. There's eight issues of the
Oh,
comic,
nice.
and over those eight issues, they visit more places, they do more things, they see more of the results of the brigands' desecration of planets and killing of innocent
Right.
people. They see it's much more of a journey trying to find Krem. So it's
Hmm.
almost like a sort of a detective story where they're trying to trace Krem on each planet. There's a clue
Yeah.
to the next planet, which you don't. You kind of get the gist of a little bit in this film because they're still trying to chase
Mm,
him down, aren't they? For the poison for
hmm.
Krypto.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I mean, again, it's really hard to convert a long narrative into an hour and 48 film, isn't it? And you've got to cut some things. And
Yeah.
famously, we'll go on to Jason Momoa. His character, there was much more of him in the director's cut.
I was there.
Wasn't there?
Right. Okay.
I think it was a Bake Off type thing. I think you mentioned this before the
Well,
podcast.
I think with thing what we didn't know
Yeah,
until recently was because the thing is James Gunn very much has his finger on this particular one as well. And
yeah,
so the question was, well, how did that come? Because we've got a perfectly good director, so what happened? And then it really feels like the studio, and of course Gunn leads that from a creative point of view.
yeah,
So it feels like the studio effectively, I think this is true of quite a few other films, but I think effectively what they do is they do sort of initial screenings, test screenings, and then
yeah,
they go for reshoots. And so what they did here is they did effectively two cuts. One cut which was done by the director, and one which was done by Gunn. There was an initial cut which must have been done. There must have been that initial cut because it wouldn't by Gillespie because otherwise you wouldn't be able to do the reshoots. I feel like that probably was enough for them to say, well, hang on, no, this one's got to do better than that. But of course, that kind of meddling then gets in the way of a lot of the storytelling. Um, and so it turns out that basically they did two viewings, and one was for Gillespie, and one was for Gunn. That was a couple of points ahead. It really was very narrow, and it feels like. I mean, I'm quite interested to see what Gillespie's was.
Well,
But
maybe when they release this on streaming and on Blu-ray, there'll be I don't know. It's a bit of a
it
risk, isn't it?
it'll be
Showing
resigned.
that cut.
Yeah, it'll probably be resigned
No,
because the thing is, Gunn can get away with
release the Gillespie
doing
cut.
that. Yeah, exactly. He can get away with doing that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
I feel like Gillespie's cut will probably just get resigned to the cutting room floor. But
it's the same place
it
as
is
Batgirl or where it was.
well, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But the thing is, it's just there was quite a lot of cuts that happened. There was very much a focus of keeping it under 2 hours, and the problem with that is I feel like, and as I say, I haven't seen the Gillespie cuts, I can't tell you, but I feel like some of the character work that must have been shot maybe had come from the comics, or maybe, but they must have shot more character work, and then a lot of it seems to have just got dropped.
It's frustrating, isn't it? Because I do believe that Matthias Schoenaerts' character, who played Krem, he was actually the uncle of Jennifer Lawrence's character in Red Sparrow. That's
Oh,
where I
right.
recognise him from.
Oh,
Have you
nice.
seen Red Sparrow?
I haven't, no. No, I'll have to
It's a
watch
good
it.
film. He's her uncle in there, his Russian
Ah,
uncle, and I recognise him because of his face, but obviously he's very made up with all the bits
yes.
of metal on his face. But I just felt like he was a bit one-dimensional. I just felt like there was not enough development. There was no real, like, if you compare it to something like Black Panther, where we really could sympathise with the villain in that.
Yeah.
I felt like he was underserved a little bit because he's a good actor, and
Yeah.
he was just really a MacGuffin for revenge more than anything else as
Yeah. And
Krem.
they
And the
really
comics
did
do
touch
deal.
it
There's
a lot.
there's a lot more conversation between Krem and Supergirl and Ruthye in the
Right.
comics as they're chasing him down, and I feel like he was a bit underserved, so maybe that was cut. And then
Hmm.
if we move on to the character Lobo, played by Jason Momoa.
Yes.
Now, I'd like you to talk to me about this because I was very confused by him. I've got my version of Krypto climbing all over my desk with me at the moment.
Nice.
I was confused because I initially thought that Aquaman was arriving, and
Yeah.
that he's basically his makeup was running from swimming underwater.
Yeah.
He'd been cosplaying as a member of Kiss and gone swimming to his underwater domain and then come out. But then he was on a motorbike. Now, he's not in the comic in any way at all,
No. No.
Lobo. And so I was a bit confused about what he was doing in this at all. Do you know much about the character?
Yeah. I mean, he's so my understanding is he's appeared in some comic series, so he
Right.
there is lore from him,
There is.
but it feels like it's just dropped into this. And I think probably just to counter Alcock's character, they wanted some another face and another sort of energy to kind of counter that. And he certainly brings that, which is good. But it is a bit
How did
confusing
you feel about
because,
him? How did you feel about him as a character?
well, he's not very well. He's not very well introduced. And I
No.
feel like, because the thing is, it's it needs because he's meant to be sort of part god, so he's meant to have superhuman strength and be invulnerable and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the
But he's a
thing is,
bounty hunter, really, isn't he?
that's right. He's a bounty
Yeah, with a
hunter.
code.
But the thing is, he's meant to be like way more imposing and way more sort of darker than this.
Yeah.
With humor, yes, that's true, but he should be well. People need to be really fearful of him, and then the problem is that was absolutely glossed over in the introduction, and then you never got it back. So apart from the
I
fact that
think
he
I
was
think
fighting for them, it wasn't. It didn't feel
yeah.
like he found like a sidekick, and that's not what it needed to do. He should have turned the tide at certain times. Whereas what happened was that you went, oh, I don't know what's happening, and then he popped up, but it just because he just didn't, that presence wasn't there, and it was almost like he was, it's like Aquaman, really. It feels like almost like he's enjoying it a bit too much, and so
I
it just
think I
ruined
think
ruined it.
he enjoys. I think the actor Jason, he enjoys being a superhero. I think he was quite
Hmm.
keen to play another character in the DC universe. I think it was a bit misguided putting the same actor in the same universe as a
Yeah,
different role. For those people who aren't so clued up on all the characters, which I'm not
mm,
really. I know a few, but from history. But I just found it a bit confusing
mm,
in the comic. So the situation in the film is really he's there to help Supergirl at the last
that's
moment
it.
when she's finally defeated in the final battle, isn't she?
Yeah,
And in the comic, a different character comes and helps her.
mm.
And the good thing about the comic is that the character that comes and helps her isn't a bloke.
Okay, that's good.
kind of. And I felt a little bit, there's so many films where the heroes are male out there. And for all those girls who want to identify with a superhero, having Supergirl as the main heroine is brilliant. There's a female superhero as the lead. And suddenly, at the very last minute, this all-powerful female character needs a bloke to help her out at the end. And I felt a little bit like, come on, she's got agency, she's got the strength. There must be another way that this can be solved without a bloke literally on a motorbike, but not a horse, nice and shining armour. It just felt a bit of a cop-out. Now, again, this sounds kind of a woke argument, and I hate using that word. I can see why this might please some viewers if he Saved by a Man. I just felt it was a bit of a cop-out, really. I think there must have been an easy way of if they're changing the story from the comic, they could change it to help out. I don't know.
But I just how
they would have done it.
I just feel like he lacked gravitas. And I think that's the thing. It's kind of it felt like he was doing Minecraft, where he is a caricature of he's not actually himself at all. But it felt a bit like that, but with more makeup and more costume.
Yeah.
And that wasn't meant to be like that. He's meant to be. You've got meant to fear him, but he gives his loyalty carefully, and that just went in this.
Well, I think a lot of his scenes were cut, weren't they, as well? From
yes.
Again, in the Gillespie cut, there was more about him. There's more about the Krem.
I think he needed
it's a bit of a shame.
But I mean, it just meant that there were times where, for example, in the end, where she decides how to deal with what's the Krem? Yeah, once she decides how to deal with Krem, and he looks on in they cut him into this slightly, but you don't know what he's thinking, because it's just you don't know anything about him. It's like, how can he be approving of this, because he literally knows nothing about it. And so I just feel like that it was just it was a caricature rather than the actual character. It's a fairly light character, but I just couldn't make sense of why you'd spend the effort to introduce someone like that. You could have easily gone with I don't know, like Wonder Woman would have been a good option, for example.
And it would save the day, you mean?
Yeah, but you could have done something. I mean, you could have done someone else, and it would have worked perfectly fine. Because they wouldn't have needed the introduction, and they wouldn't have needed to get warmed up. Whereas, if you don't have time, then just parachute someone in. It's anyway.
I mean, I dread to think how much it cost them to have Jason Momoa as the actor as well. Who would you have recast instead of Jason Momoa? Who would you cast instead?
Oh, good question. Yeah.
There's got to be someone. I mean, I have no idea what the character looks like in the comics. So, I mean, generally speaking, if you want to try and cast someone that looks a bit like him, and he kind of looks. I mean, I'm looking at pictures of him now, and to be fair, I mean, he looks a bit more like who plays Wolverine? Help me out! Come on, famous actor, Australian actor.
Oh, Hugh Jackman.
He looks. I think Hugh Jackman could have rocked him a bit more, actually.
Yeah.
He looks like an evil version of Wolverine with
he would have had way
Leslie
much
Simmons'
more.
eyes.
Yeah, he would have had so much more presence, wouldn't he?
But you could also, I don't know, you could also, I'm trying to find and remember his name now, Alan Richardson, who plays Reacher, Jack Reacher, might have been quite cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've seen him with long hair in a trailer for a new film called Motor Nights, which looks amazing, by the way. Check out the trailer for Motor Night. I think it's called Motor City. Motor City, it's called.
Right. Yes.
And he looks a bit dodged with long hair, so I don't know if that will work. But he's definitely, he's a unit. He's an absolute unit. It would have been perfect. Or even maybe the guy who plays Punisher would have been great, because he's a natural motorbike. But I don't know. I mean, again, that would be confusing, wouldn't it? Because it's he's in Marvel films as well.
Yeah,
but
but you're right. He needs that level of gravitas. And the difficulty is that should have been Momoa, but it wasn't. I don't know. It's one of those things that I think he didn't look like he was in very good shape.
Yeah,
And I just think that he lent onto the humor too much, and they didn't paint his history at all. So it just
yeah,
he became a bit of a joke. And that was the real problem. I don't think he was given much to work with, though. While I'd
no.
love to just say like, oh, another character, person would have done a much better job. Um, I feel like, yeah, he probably wasn't given much to work with. Um,
Let's look
yeah.
at the production values of the film. I mean,
Mm,
I really enjoyed the look of the film, the
yes.
colours, and I mean, I thought the costume design was really good. I love Milly Alcock's long jacket she wears, and
Hmm.
um, it is quite hard, I think, to when you're creating this universe to clothe it. And I think they did a really good job.
Yes.
And I think the production design was really good. We've got to the stage now where, give or take the old Flash film, the Flash character in one of the DC films,
Hmm.
special effects are very good now and very.
Mm,
This film had a lot. I think what's really interesting. I was looking into kind of how it was filmed. I enjoyed some of the photography and how Craig Gillespie used the camera movement, because this was filmed in IMAX,
mm,
using IMAX cameras. So maybe the next time I go and see it, I'll go and see it at the IMAX in London. But when he was filming the calmer scenes, you'll notice the camera movement's much smoother. And
mm.
then in the angrier scenes, much more chaotic. And especially when you're wondering, like you're looking around Supergirl's spaceship and it's kind of Krypto's jumping around. And I
Yeah.
think that's really clever. It's very subtle storytelling technique, but it's a good
Mm,
use of camera work. I
mm.
enjoyed that. I think they did get across the feel of the different planets with the colours of the suns.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so what are your feelings? Did you enjoy
Um,
its
I
design and look?
I loved the look of because they looked at several different worlds. Um, it
Hmm.
very much had a Star Wars vibe to it, which actually works for it really well because that's
Yeah,
actually the nice thing about the like cantinas is how grounded they are. They don't have to be, filled with CGI. They can be quite realistic, and
yeah.
so that was
I
actually
love it
quite
was
nice. The
filmed.
bar was great.
Yeah.
That
Also, the
worked well.
landscapes obviously were filmed in real landscapes rather than using green
Yes.
screens or volumes as well,
Yeah, yeah. But it was no, it was
which is
just
good.
it just worked well. Um, it was just wasn't backed up by some of the character work and the story work,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But yeah, I didn't feel like it scrimped at all. It didn't feel like it was done cheaply or anything. It was really good. It's the kind of world that I'd like to learn more of, which tells me
Yeah.
that they did a good job. It's a similar to was it Star Trek Outlaws? The
Yes, the game.
the
Yeah.
game. Like it's
Oh,
just
yeah.
like
Yeah, yeah,
because there's
yeah.
quite a lot of places there. You're like, oh, I want to explore this, and obviously you can in the game, but it's just had that feel to it of somewhere you want to spend a bit more time.
It
But
kind, yeah,
we didn't.
it's kind of an attractive thing, isn't it? The Wild West
Mm,
in space, which is what Outlaws is as
yes,
well, really,
that's
isn't it?
right.
It's kind of a,
Mm,
and also it kind of adheres to George Lucas's idea of worn technology, where everything's got a little bit worn down. The fact that they
yes,
have to sit at a bus stop in this field and wait for the next spaceship to take them off the planet, and
yeah,
it's a pretty, and the bus driver, the spaceship driver is like a high school bus driver,
that's
and
it.
I love that design, and I think it's well chosen. It's not all shiny and squeaky clean,
No,
which is kind
no.
of it's the sci-fi of the 70s and 80s, and it all sort of steel and sharp edges. So I like that design. I really do. So were there any sort of standout moments in the film that you can remember that you really enjoyed?
Um, I
This is a
think
test of a good film, isn't it?
yeah, I think the thing is, Gunn's always pretty good at his music choices.
Yeah,
And I feel like the bar scene, for example, that's played over Wet Leg.
yeah,
And actually, I quite like them, so that worked out really well. So I was like, yeah, this could work. I can see that working. And so that was really positive. But then we had the final one as well, didn't we? I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember the name of it. The final cut, like the final music, didn't work for me at all. It was just absolutely horrific. I'm just looking it up
Was
now.
that now? Was that orchestral music, or was that a famous song chosen for it, like an 80s pop song or something?
No, it was. This was
Because
it.
it,
It was
yeah,
Jimmy Eat World's The Middle. And
right,
and then the thing is, that was because they was coming to a crescendo, and
yeah,
they were going to fight, and ultimately they were going to kill Krem, weren't they? So but
mm,
the thing is, it's just the choices of that particular song just didn't work. It was just you had all this pace that was happening visually, and then you were just had this music behind it that was slow, contemplative. And yes, I get it. There's a choice to be made at this particular point, but it's just it really dragged, and that last scene where while this was playing was just frustrating. So I think that was
the
like good and bad of
yeah.
music choices there.
I know in the Gillespie cut he had different pacing and different music playing in the
Yeah,
background, so it's possible that was a studio decision for that. And
they
also,
had
what's unusual is the score. The composer who made the score of the film, Claudia
mhm.
Sarn, they was not the first choice. In fact, several different composers were chosen,
Mm.
and they changed them. It's actually post production before
Do
they ended
you
up with Claudia Sarn. So
do you
that's
think that
interesting, isn't it?
happens a
Really?
lot, or do you think that's a DC thing and a gun thing? Because it feels very much like it was like Death by a Thousand Cuts. Like it wasn't like it probably didn't start off awful, but they
Yeah,
obviously didn't like it enough. And then it feels like every point they've sort of go, yeah, no, that's not good enough. Cut that one. Cut this one. And it just
yeah.
kind of feels like some of
Well,
its heart is taken from it.
there are standout moments in the soundtrack where you hear the lilt of the Superman theme,
Hmm.
especially when Kara, when she there are pivotal moments where she suddenly realizes who she is and her
Yeah.
responsibilities, and or special events happen, and you hear that the lilt of the Superman theme, which was lovely, and I guess that was
Mm.
written into it that she had to do that. That would have
Mm.
been a directorial decision. It's very hard to know because there are so many different ways music's made for films. I mean, there's some famous stories of Hans Zimmer writing tracks that inspired scenes in the films rather than the other way around. Usually a composer is taken on before a film starts, and they work
Mm.
alongside, the rest of the film crew.
That's right.
Sometimes it's afterwards. I imagine Daft Punk had a big input into the Tron film because they're in it as
Hmm.
well, and I imagine they
Hmm.
probably wrote a lot beforehand as well. So it's very
Mm.
hard to tell. I would imagine it sounds like from all the gossip that we've researched online, Alex, and the fact that there was
Yeah.
you know, in the politest possible way, Gillespie and his studio weren't always creatively aligned.
No, not at
I
all.
think maybe there was some friction in this film that caused issues with, as you say, the script, the cuts
Yeah.
they have to make, the music, the pace, the development of the villains. And I really, really wish studios would just trust directors. And it's clear when you see, and it's why a lot of very, very famous directors will always demand they get final decision on the cut over the studio. And if you
Yeah.
you generally find that films that have that relationship with the studio are better films because the directors should know. The problem
Yeah.
is going into any of these films, they're absolute behemoths when they're part of a franchise like Marvel or DC. You really, I think as a director, you've got to go in there going, I'm going to try and put a stamp on this, but I'm not going to get
Mm.
I'm not going to have power of veto for this because it's such a big money making machine, which is a real shame,
Yes.
because actually it's not a bad film. It's an enjoyable film. It's come out okay. And
I
it's a
mean,
real
I
shame
think,
because, as you said earlier, I'd love to see another one of these films. I'd love to see another Supergirl film.
yeah, I think the thing that
I
hit
like the
me
universe.
when I was watching it was actually it does pretty good job in very limited time of explaining the plight of the Kryptonians
Yeah.
and kind of giving you a reason why
Oh, yes.
Kara is so jaded. And I think in that respect, I'm like, wow, okay, no, I like this. This is, we don't get all of the details, but we basically, they've flawed
Yes.
and they've made mistakes that ultimately cost them their survival, and
I
she's
really
just
enjoyed that
thrust
story.
into that. And genuinely,
Yeah.
that's great, and it just because what it did is it kind of painted the reason why she was so jaded and why she was disconnected from
Mm.
everyone, in a way
Well,
that
she's
like
basically suffering from trauma, isn't she?
yeah. Well, they
PTSD,
couldn't seem
actually.
to explain this at the start, so because of that, I was like, well, that's why it felt initially a little bit off. Whereas now, if you
Mm.
look back at it, then you're like, okay, I get it a bit now. Ultimately, it's quite hard to sort of show that in a performance, like over something that's shot in multiple days, and like it's just yeah. So I can understand the challenges. Like if you look at Millie at the start and the end, you're probably not going to see much difference. But the reality is it kind of makes her character richer. So that was really positive, and it was like
Yeah.
okay, that's
I enjoyed
great.
the Argo story. It was really good.
Yes.
And it was interesting to see. I mean, obviously, I was a massive, massive fan of was it 1984, the other Star
Hmm.
Supergirl
Hmm.
movie? I think it's mid
Yeah.
80s
Helen
anyway.
Slater.
Yeah, Helen Slater. I mean, I had a massive crush on Helen Slater after that film.
Yep.
She was in
Yeah.
that
Me
Michael
too.
J. Fox film, wasn't she? The Secret of My Success as well,
Yes.
which she was
That's
very good
right.
in. But
That was her moment.
yeah, I really enjoyed the film. The film itself, when you watch it again now, the original Supergirl is a bit terrible, really. It's more
Yeah.
like a
Oh
pantomime
God,
than a
yeah.
film. And
Yeah.
Helen Slater's great, and she plays
Hmm.
the role really well as this sort of kind of like pure character. And I was always very confused why Argo was underneath RC's.
Mm.
But I looked it up, and actually, in the 1984 Supergirl movie with Helen Slater,
Right.
the origin of Argo in the kind of the canon as it is now is that it's basically a fragment of Krypton that had a dome over it that managed to be sort of ejected before the main explosion of the planet. And
Hmm.
actually, if you in the comic, what's really interesting is there's a scene in the comic where Kara, who's basically one of the last few people remaining on Krypton because she's the youngest,
Hmm.
she's walking through. It reminded me a bit of Arya walking through the broken streets of. Spoiler for Game of Thrones, by the way, right at the end of season 7 or 8, where she's walking through Westeros and it's in ruins after the attack of the dragons.
Yeah.
She's doing a similar thing. She's walking through the streets of her, of the city, cities on Krypton,
Hmm.
and she's experiencing people lying dead on the ground, cut in half, and she's
Mm.
silent and traumatized.
Mm.
And so the comic really shows you her motivation for being jaded and PTSD essentially. In the Supergirl movie of 1980s, Argo is essentially they create the people of Argo to escape Krypton exploding. They
Right.
create a good version of the Phantom Zone. So they have this kind of Phantom Zone where they're staying. That's not the dark Phantom Zone. It's like a good version, which
Hmm.
is kind of held together with like the same sort of crystals.
Oh right.
It's like
Yeah.
a big greenhouse. Have you seen it? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And so there's a power source that keeps them inside that Phantom Zone dimensional rift,
Hmm.
and it goes missing, gets stolen, and ends up in Earth. So when she
Mm.
comes out through the water, in Supergirl in the 80s, I
Mm.
thought, oh, Argo's underneath our sea, but no, it's like a portal into our world, basically. That
Yeah.
makes
Good.
sense. But in this canon, obviously, it's floating in space with a dome over it, protecting it from the atmosphere,
Yeah.
from the void. And what happens is the light of the suns around it converts the soil underneath Argo into kryptonite, and that starts to kill off all the people in the city. And so she's got to deal with her mum dying and so on. And I love that kind of created this background for her reason why she had to leave in a very similar way to Kal-El in a spaceship, in a rocket ship out of the city. In fact, there was even one reference, which is quite clever, which was her father, which is Zor-El, isn't it? Played by David Krumholtz. He mentions about the dodgy message that Superman's parents record about him ruling planet Earth as king. They do actually refer to that and say, we're not sure about his politics and his idea with Kal-El. I thought that was really cool. They actually refer to that as well, which shows, because the last thing her mum says to her is, be good.
That's it.
You know, and that's such a strong thing for her, because she's struggling with that. And the comics do address that as well. So, no, I think there's some really good background kind of story going on here. And yes, maybe it was easier for Milly to be Supergirl, because she's so well served with the story. And it's much harder for Jason Momoa and for Matthias Schoenaerts, because their characters were pretty one-dimensional.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, so standout points. I did actually enjoy the fight at the end, even though you didn't like the music. I enjoyed the visuals. I thought that was really cool. Had she put the costume on by then? I think she had, hadn't she?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's in the costume by that point.
She had, yeah.
And all of the hostages were coming down, and it was nicely done.
Yeah, it was cool. Yeah, and there were people hanging off the bottom of the. Yeah, it was good, wasn't it? Which I think in the comic is a pirate ship.
Oh, right,
essentially, a pirate spaceship, because they're brigands, aren't they?
Yeah,
and actually, if you look at the design of the spaceship, because the ship the brigands were on in the comic is called the Bonnie Prince Charlie. I can just show you. If you look here, you can just see the design of the ship in the comic.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Which is still this is basically that same scene, the battle at the end with. But
brilliant.
So I quite enjoyed that design. I liked the relationship between Ruthye and Supergirl and Kara, and how that developed, and that kind of the burgeoning trust between them. And she was obviously, protecting her as well as trying to help her. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because she knew, without her, she'd still do it anyway. That's quite cool.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things that, because that's the thing, isn't it? You're thinking about Ruthye, and you're like, someone please stop her from. She's going to get herself killed. And
she is, yeah.
But she got all the way to the end without that happening. And so I do think it's kind of. It's nice how they painted that. It's like, no, you can't do that. And then obviously the way that the film ended was, but I can do it.
Yeah.
So
read the comic and the ending is way better in the comic, way better, which is a shame.
Yeah, I think I need to.
When you get
now that you've
you do need to read it.
Yeah.
It's
I think
it's
so.
a really good read. Actually, I'm really impressed with it.
Nice. And you got it on paperback.
Yeah, there's a hard copy version as well. It's nice. It comes with all variant issue covers at the end as well, which I always love to see.
Oh, sweet. That's good.
Yeah, it's beautifully drawn. Supergirl looks quite different in it. She looks much more like this kind of and Krem is very different. Again, the Krem looks more like a pirate in this as well, because it's kind of a mixture of knights and pirates and westerns. So
it kind of goes with the material,
the theme.
Yeah, exactly.
So my last thought to you, Alex, is: do you think that Supergirl is an example of a film with a standout lead performance trapped inside an average superhero movie, or do you think the critics have been harsher than the audience? Is it a film that's been trashed by the critics, but the audience are a bit more impressed? Or, I mean, the sales figures kind of reflect that as well, don't they?
So
or is it? Is there something more to it?
I kind of feel like, I feel like the critics and the build-up to this film probably doomed it, and I don't think it helped the way that they cut it, and how they ran that. I just don't think that helped at all. But underneath all of that, there's quite an enjoyable film. I kind of, the thing is, I was thinking about where I'd put this, and I've almost I'm really closely matched at IMDb because I put it in as a 7. I said no more than a 7.
Yeah,
It's not an
seven and a
8 or
half,
9.
perhaps.
No, I think it is a 7. But
Okay.
but I think the thing for me is I was like, I don't think that Millie could have changed her performance and made it a 7.5 or 8.
No.
I think all of the rest of that came down to cutting, politics, like our expectation for these kind of films, and just this obsession with getting. I think it's more a DC thing, getting it really, really close to 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I felt like that really hurt this film. So yeah, so from Minnie's perspective, she did great. But I mean, I just I don't think you could have done better. Wouldn't have changed the outcome. I think that's it. It's just yeah.
One
It's
more
like
thing. Do
oh,
you
go on.
think? Do you think superhero movies have had their day now? Do you think have we hit peak superhero movies, or will the new Spider-Man film make everything better again?
So I am
Just the
looking
thing.
forward to Spider-Man. It's pretty reliable, and I know where we are with him. But I do also think that we're kind of a bit exhausted by
Yeah.
superhero movies in general. And that's a problem if you're Marvel and DC because that's your bread and butter. That's what you've got. And I just feel like the bit that I always enjoy from films is the characters and the character work. And sadly, this film couldn't deliver on that, which is a real shame because it should have been able to.
Mm.
But I still enjoyed it. I still
Mm.
think it's like it had for me Thunderbolts vibes. If you watched
Okay.
Thunderbolts, haven't you? And
Yeah,
it
yeah,
for
yeah,
me
yeah. I
it
enjoyed
had
that.
that vibes. It was just like some bits of it were enjoyable. Some bits of it was like it felt like you were watching the B team rather than the A team, and I was all right with that. I didn't, that was okay.
It's kind, it's kind of like a Saturday afternoon movie you'd see on ITV
Yes,
on repeat, isn't it? That's
yeah.
that's on. We'll watch
What
that.
what what did you
It's not the
think?
sort of
Would
film
you
that
watch
gets
it?
you again. You mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll watch it again. I'd
Hmm.
like to see it again with actually. I think probably I'll enjoy more seeing it again with my son and watching it with someone else and
Right.
seeing how
Good.
they react to it as well.
Yeah.
Um, this has been the year. This in last year has been the year of horror films. I mean, there's been a lot more horror
Mm,
films winning Oscars, and I
mm,
think there's been a real horror film. There's always been good horror films, always, but I think there's
mm.
been a much more. There's been a higher kind of amount of quality horror films in the recent, Weapons and Long Legs
Hmm.
and The Monkey and many, many more. And I think that's kind of where, and a lot of independent filmmakers have been making horror films and been very successful. And there's the Back Rooms as well, it's just kind
Yes.
of a horror thriller, sci-fi thing. And I think, and Exit 8 as well, of course. And I think these sort of
Hmm.
films with a big budget and high expectations, we might see less of them as they become less of a safe bet. Um,
It's a pity these don't move to TV because it used to be that they would move to
yeah,
TV where the budgets are a little bit lower, and it would
yeah,
still be enjoyable. Whereas I think actually we had that over COVID, and it was arguably quite a good time to be on TV and streaming. Whereas
yeah.
I think now it's being relegated to TV isn't going to cut it for a lot of people, and it will just end up
Well,
with not being seen.
there has been a very good Supergirl series, isn't there,
Oh
on
yeah,
the streaming
yeah,
service
that's
as
right
well?
on
You know,
CW.
what's it called? It's called the Arrowverse, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
It's part of the Arrowverse.
yes,
So yeah, maybe that's where they go with her. Maybe they do a TV series instead. But
yeah.
I would like to see. I would like to see more of Milly Alcock as Supergirl. I really would.
Yes.
I think, and I'd like to see more of this universe. But I think, unfortunately, they have to make this film successful. They need to have made at least 450 million. It's usually about two and a half the cost of the budget of the film, and they
That's
haven't done
it.
that.
Yeah.
So I can't see any more happening, which is a real shame. But
I, yeah.
as
I
an
think.
actress, we'll see her in lots of other things, I imagine.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's not. We'll see
Yeah,
plenty from her. I
yeah,
just the thing is, if this is the performance from a Supergirl, I really don't know where Clayface is going to get, because he's even less known than Supergirl, and I don't know. And it's
is there
coming
a
out.
Clayface film coming out?
So Clayface is coming out in October 2026.
I've never heard of him.
And then Man of Tomorrow comes. Yeah, a bit like that. And then Man of Tomorrow comes out next year. But the thing is, right, you've got GTA 6 coming out. That's in November. And you've got Avengers as well. So
Doomsday,
yeah. So I really don't. I can't imagine that it's going to do well. I can't see how it can do well. And the thing that just worries me is if Supergirl can't do well, then like what hope is it for even less well known ones?
The niche characters.
I think I'm just still bitter because of Batgirl. But that's just me.
Yeah.
I feel like if you're going to do a film, at least, even if it's not as good as you thought it would be, finish it and get it out there, and then move on, because that's what actors are used to doing. So you should, as a studio, you should do the same.
Used to say, Steve Jobs, one of his phrases, because I'm reading the David Pogue book, 50 Years of Apple.
Yeah.
His phrase was real artists ship.
Yes, yeah.
So,
it doesn't have to be perfect, but you get it out there, and then you say, "This is what I worked on," and this is where it got to. Thank you for watching. There'll be more, and that's what you do. You don't just go, "Oh no, commercially it's better that we just don't ship something," or don't play around with that kind of stuff.
Dodge. Yeah.
Yeah, but then. As a
Alex.
director, who would work for DC at the moment? Because it doesn't sound like a very accepting studio to work for. So
no.
Anyway, good luck to them.
Yeah. Well, I would say to you, if you're still watching this, definitely go out and watch it, or if it's on streaming or purchase, it's a good film. I'll probably will buy it still. So I quite enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I've got
definitely worth watching.
The 2025 Superman film on. I bought that, so I'll probably get this as well. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's worth watching.
On that note, I think
could be better.
Yeah. I think we should go approaching the hour slot here. We should call it a day,
Perfect.
Alex.
Perfect timing.
Thank you so much. It's good to catch up. We haven't seen each other for ages. You can catch Bobby in more videos to come up. He's just overcoming a bit of some personal bad news in his life, and we didn't want to drag him onto here and talk about Milly Alcock with enthusiasm, but he'll be back soon with the cape at some point.
That's right.
Keep an eye on the YouTube channel. There's more content, I hate that word, more stuff coming out. I've got an interesting app I want to show people that I've been using.
Oh, nice.
And more of our weird conversations, me and Bobby over the weekends.
We need to have a conversation about AI
to them
as well. I feel like that could be one for all of us. So
okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it could be an interesting one.
We've ranted about it a bit, but it'd be good to have
a
three-way conversation. Yes,
I've heard this, and I'm like, if I could have joined, but no,
there you go.
Good
That's
to
good idea.
do that. All right.
Okay. Well, as always, do like and do subscribe to our channel and do spread the word. And you can see more of the stuff on our YouTube channel. Bobby's got a women's Arsenal.
He has.
Podcast and video. I haven't checked the videos. I think it's just podcasts, but he's going to berate me for not getting that right. But do watch out for that. I wish I could remember the name of it. He has talked to me about it.
Is it Women's Arsenal Trailblazers?
Yes, that's it. Well done. I think I'll remember.
Well, Arsenal Women's Trailblazers. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah. It's say it again because I was talking over you.
So it's Arsenal Women's Trailblazers.
Yeah. Now that is quite a niche, but if you're a fan of the Arsenal women's team, it's probably is the number one podcast to listen to. So I go and listen to it.
I'd like it.
Thank you for watching or listening and joining us, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.